Greetings and welcome to Week 6, Unit 3. What is critical thinking? In the last unit, we explored some ways of instruction for metacognition. Now in this unit, we will try to understand what critical thinking is. The word critical thinking at least is used heavily by everyone concerned with education. You look at any website of any college or government documents, they say critical thinking is very important and we train our people in critical thinking. But till now, based on my experience, I don't think any of those people are very clear about what critical thinking is and how it is to be inculcated. And do we have really the scope for incorporating into the curriculum? Now let us try to understand what the critical thinking is in this unit. And also in the next unit we will explore how can we instruct for critical thinking. Now you obviously have to start with the word thinking, and then we say what is critical thinking. Thinking, everyone thinks, so it's not any new word. It is our nature to do so. That is human nature. Much of our thinking left to itself is biased, because the way we have opinions, the way we interact, it is based on our biases. It is many times distorted, partial, uninformed, or downright prejudiced. Obviously, all these features you would have noticed in your even simple conversations with our people. You will notice, we may not notice our biases, our prejudices that very clearly, but we certainly seem to be noticing others' biases and prejudices. Yet the quality of our life and that of what we produce, make, or build depends precisely on the quality of our thought. Whatever we can say quality of our thought means less prejudiced at least, or less distorted, less partial. If you have improved on that scale, then whatever we do, whatever activity that we perform in our life, it will be of a better quality, and shoddy thinking is costly, both in money and in quality of life. So if you realize that, then people will make an attempt to see whether we can improve the quality of our thinking. Excellence in thought, however, must be systematically cultivated. I strongly recommend two books, Richard Paul and Linda Elder. It's a miniature guide to critical thinking, concepts and tools. And incidentally, these two persons belong to an organization called criticalthinking.org. There is a website of that, and all the professors across several universities in the world, they come together, debate about these issues, and whatever some material, resource material is kept on the website, and some of them have been converted into small guides or detailed books which can be bought. Okay, so this is from such a book. There is another person who has done extensive work in this area, and has been conducting large number of workshops for all types of people. Stephen Brookfield, he himself has written a book called, or several books in fact, one of the books, Teaching for Critical Thinking, Tools and Techniques to Help Students Question Their Assumptions. Of course, this book is very detailed, whereas the earlier one was a miniature guide, you can say. Now, if you want to formally define what critical thinking is, Richard Paul and Linda Elder, they say critical thinking is the art of analyzing and evaluating thinking with a view to improving it. Okay, so from that perspective, the two elements of critical thinking are analyzing and evaluating. These two are already attempted, are already the cognitive processes that we have identified in what you call revised Bloom's taxonomy. So to that extent, we don't have to add the critical thinking as another cognitive process in the revised Bloom's taxonomy. The only difference is you have a purpose. You just not merely analyze or evaluate. The purpose is to improve it. Okay, whatever thinking you are doing, you are trying to improve it. And if you translate this, critical thinking is self-directed, self-monitored, and self-corrective thinking. That is, your first of all, the motivation to do critical thinking has to come from you. You have to be motivated, and to that extent then it will be self-directed, and then you are also monitoring yourself how you are thinking, and then after monitoring, if you are not happy with what you are, then you will also keep correcting yourself. So that these are the nature of critical thinking. So the formal definition is critical thinking is the art of analyzing and evaluating thinking with a view to improving it. That is the one simple single sentence definition. Stephen Brookfield puts it in a slightly different way, emphasizing certain aspects of critical thinking. Critical thinking is actively identifying and checking the assumptions that shape our thinking and behavior, locating sources of power and interest behind ideas, and using multiple perspectives to test and improve what we believe and do. Now, if you look at this, most of the sentence belongs to what we call as analyzing. Analyzing, in that part you are trying to identify assumptions, you are trying to find what is related to what, and you are trying to do attribution. These are all part of what you call analyzing process that he has elaborated in the first part of the sentence. And then instead of saying with a view to improving it, he says test and improve what we believe and do. So they are saying the same thing but in a slightly different way. It is practical and reflective. The goal is better decisions and practices, not mere skepticism for its own sake. Critically thinking means that you try to look at others' arguments and say this is wrong, that is wrong, so you are not are able to reason properly, not that kind of thing. The idea is how do I improve? And that's what characterizes critical thinking, not mere skepticism. Please remember that. And to that extent, with respect to revised Bloom's taxonomy, if you take analyze and evaluate processes, they are hierarchically superior to other aspects, other processes, namely remember, understand and apply. Those activities are still there in this also, but focus is on analyze and evaluate. And to that, if you add this additional dimension of view to improving, then it becomes critical thinking. That's what critical thinking is with regard to what we are in the context of revised Bloom's taxonomy. Now, what does a well cultivated critical thinker, what does he do? Raises vital questions and problems, formulating them clearly and precisely. So he focuses on formulating very clear problems. And this is part of what you call analysis as well. Gathers and assesses relevant information using abstract ideas to interpret it effectively. He assesses information, comes to well-reasoned conclusions and solutions, testing them against relevant criteria and standards. He is not satisfied by merely coming to conclusions from the available data, but he will test them against relevant criteria and standards. Thinks open-mindedly within alternative systems of thought, recognizing and assessing as need be their assumptions, implications and practical consequences. One of the things that a critical thinker does is he will try to look at it from different viewpoints, what you call alternate systems of thought. For example, we often hear about Western way of thinking, Eastern way of thinking, or Hindu way of thinking. Like that, we keep talking about different perspectives. These are different perspectives or alternate systems of thought. And the another dimension of a critical thinker is communicates effectively with others in figuring out solutions to complex problems. So communication now becomes a very important aspect of this. If you are not able to communicate effectively, you cannot continue with your critical thinking process. So that is an additional requirement for someone to be critical in their thought. So summarizing, critical thinking, it requires rigorous standards of excellence and mindful command of their use. What does it mean? First, you must be able to, we will talk about what constitutes excellence, various parameters are identified. One is standards of excellence, but it also means mindful command of their use. That means it becomes second nature to you. It's part of your thinking process itself. At every point you are looking at what is the bias in this, or what assumptions are made, do I have the required data, or am I making a conclusion purely out of superficial knowledge about something, which we all do actually. So mindful command of their use means it should become completely internalized. It also entails effective communication, problem solving abilities. If you can't, obviously you are not a critical thinker. If you are not able to communicate and solve problems. Then more difficult and important of all, it requires commitment to overcoming our native egocentrism and sociocentrism. Sociocentrism means we belong to Karnataka. In Karnataka we think like this. This is our priority. This is our way of life. Or Hindu way of life. Or this is the way Indians are supposed to be doing. That is sociocentrism. Whereas native egocentrism, that everyone has some amount of that. This is my knowledge, this is my experience, and this is what I think. And so it requires commitment to overcome these two centrisms, you can say, which is really a tall order. And these things especially become more important in social sciences, humanities. In these subjects they become a lot more important. Whereas in the case of engineering subjects, most of the knowledge is very definitive. There is no, many times you don't think of any opinions about that. If you are solving a differential equation, there is a method to solve the differential equation. You cannot say that is your opinion, my opinion is different. That will not work. There may be different ways of solving that. Both have to be correct, right? And only in case of engineering, the need for critical thinking arises when you are either writing some kind, you are asked to prepare a paper, or working on a project, either short or a large project, or if you are involved in extracurricular and co-curricular activities, which is also part of MBA accreditation. So only in those activities it has to be come, but through them also you can learn. You can learn to be a critical thinker. The main purpose, as stated right in the beginning, if you are a critical thinker, your quality of life will improve. But of course it can create some issues for you in another dimension, but we will not debate that right now. Okay, so first thing is for you to think critically, which is also reasoning, you can say, is there are checklists for that. If you follow this checklist, then you understand what is meant by critical thinking. All reasoning has a purpose. Okay, there is some goal towards which you are trying to go, and to that extent you have to be very clear. When I am talking about solving or trying to do a project, we do not drift into something like politics or some other issue totally unrelated to that. So there is always a focus, for there is a, what do you call, a purpose. So what does it checklist involve? Can you state your purpose clearly? Can I write on a piece of paper in a sentence or two, what is my purpose? And let's say I am discussing with other people, we can ask the others, can we agree this is our purpose? By showing that, if necessary, through discussion, even you modify the purpose. What is the objective of your reasoning? Does your reasoning focus throughout on your purpose? Because it should not drift towards other aspects. Sometimes they seem to be important, but it is also can drift you and take you away from the purpose. That you have to be cautious about. All reasoning is an attempt to figure something out, to settle some question, to solve some problem. So first there is a purpose, then further if you say, I am trying to find an answer to a question, or I am trying to solve a problem. So what question are you trying to answer? Are there other ways to think about the question? Can you divide the question into sub-questions? Is this a question that has one right answer, or can there be more than one reasonable answer? All questions do not have unique answers. So are there other non-unique answers, for example? Does this question require judgment rather than facts alone? Many times you require a judgment whether it is right or wrong, including engineering problems when you are trying to solve. All reasoning is based on assumptions. What assumptions are you making? Are they justified? How are your assumptions shaping your point of view? Which of your assumptions might reasonably be questioned? And in fact, Mr. Brookfield, he considers this is a central issue for critical thinking. He calls it hunting for assumptions. Because these assumptions are not pretty obvious and you have to hunt for them, because though indirectly they are deciding what your conclusions, but you may not notice that these assumptions are implied. Okay, another next stage, next in the checklist, all reasoning is done from some point of view. What is your point of view? What insights is it based on? What are its weaknesses? What other points of view should be considered in reasoning through this problem? What are the strengths and weaknesses of these viewpoints? Are you fair-mindedly considering the insights behind these viewpoints? Whenever you, for example, designing a course like this, offering a course like this, Instruction for Good Learning, the way we were debating, we had to debate considerably, first of all, what constitutes good learning? And are there unique ways of instruction for good learning? If there are multiple ways, on what basis do you pick what you think is right? Everything is based on certain viewpoints. We had to go through several layers of discussions before we could arrive at the specific units that we are presenting to you. For example, the same. Should we talk about critical thinking at all in the case of this particular course? That itself was a debate. Then, for the one aspect is, in the way our education system is working, this cannot be easily incorporated. Even if you say it is desirable, no, it doesn't work in our situation. You give it up. Then another viewpoint that we expressed, yes, it is difficult, but at least the people should be aware of this, that it is important for any educated person, or for that matter for everyone. So if you are not even aware of it, you cannot even bring it into eventually or indirectly into the teaching and learning processes. So this kind of debate went on, and finally we decided, okay, at some level we will try to include the 2 units on this, and in fact you can offer a complete course on critical thinking, as Mr. Brookfield has been doing for a long time. Okay. I suppose you understand all reasoning is done from some point of view. Okay, the next one, all reasoning is based on data, information and evidence. And to what extent is your reasoning supported by relevant data? Do the information and evidence suggest explanations that differ from those you have given? For example, if you have some evidence that doesn't really confirm your point of view, then what are you going to do? How clear, accurate and relevant are the data to the question at issue? Have you gathered evidence sufficient to reaching a reasonable conclusion? When I've arrived at conclusion, do we have sufficient evidence to justify and support your conclusion? Many times it depends on the authority, right? If I'm in a group, if I am more authoritative or if I have more authority, then what I say is correct. It doesn't have to be supported by evidence that I am sure all of you would have experienced in your professional life. All reasoning is expressed through and shaped by concepts and theories. Yes, you may not articulate your concepts and theories, but at least they are implicit with you. What key concepts and theories are guiding your reasoning? That is, when you are really looking at solving a problem, whatever purpose you have, if you can articulate, this is the theory, these are the concepts that I am using, then it will be easier for a group of people to work on it. What alternative explanations might be possible given these concepts and theories? Are you clear and precise in using concepts and theories in your reasoning? Are we superficially saying I am using it, but I am not strictly following it? Are you distorting ideas to fit your agenda, which generally happens in professional life? We keep distorting the ideas just because you have a different agenda. That means you say I am solving this problem, and this is what we have been observing in all educational institutes. Publicly you declare, these are our ideas. If you look at the advertisements for admission to the universities or colleges, they use very high flying words, but do you really mean them? Are you really doing things that takes your institute in that direction? So you have an idea, but your agenda is different. Okay, we will not debate those issues. What is the alternate agenda for the colleges? Okay, next one, all reasoning contains inferences or interpretations by which we draw conclusions and give meaning to data. Any reasoning contains inferences and interpretations, and based on that we draw conclusions. To what extent do the data support your conclusions? Are your inferences consistent with each other? Are there other reasonable inferences that should be considered? You should be willing to look at maybe other possible inferences. You are presented some data, based on this I come to a conclusion. But can there be other conclusions that you are drawn? And I am sure you would have seen instances where with the same data people have drawn opposite conclusions. Okay. All reasoning leads somewhere or has implications and consequences. What implications and consequences follow from your reasoning? Can you articulate and write on a piece of paper? So these are all this is the checklist for reasoning. If you are able to do that, then you have already achieved a major or rather reached a major milestone with regard to critical thinking. Let us look at some these what do you call elements of thought. Let's say you are required to write a paper on a topic, or perform an activity, or do a reading assignment, or even a project. All the 8 questions, if answered, will constitute critical thinking. Some of them may be very simple and trivial, and some, depending on the nature of activity, practically everything can become important. Here generally these things, the samples you can give where there is scope for all the elements of thought, not merely one of them. That's why it is easier to, what do you call, where you are solving a large problem or doing a project. But let me read part of it. The way the problem is presented is your team requires or takes over the DBMS for Shop EZ, a mid-size e-commerce site. Current system stores customers' orders, order items, products, inventory and shipments in a single relational schema. During promotional periods, tariff spikes 10 times and some reports run slowly. Your task: propose and justify a new schema, transaction strategy and query backup plan that meets these goals. The goals are specified as: preserve ACID for order processing, reduce average order write latency by 40% under peak period, improve nightly reporting, sales by product to finish within 30 minutes, meet data retention and audit requirements. Okay, deliverables: ER diagram plus DDL, index partition materialized view plan, transaction isolation policy, benchmark plan and results, short written justification. Now, I am not familiar with this particular database management issues. Those who are in computing area, I think they can relate to this kind of problem. But if you are trying to solve this problem or produce a solution for this, then you have to go through all the steps that we just listed. You have to use all those elements of thought. Let's give another scenario, example. The transmission operator must connect 200 megawatts of new solar plus wind power distributed across 3 substations. No major new transmission lines are available this year. The thermal fleet is aging, providing less inertia. Storage budget is limited to 20 megawatts or 80 megawatt hours. Okay, that is a statement. Regulatory requirements are there obviously when you are thinking of power distribution. Maintain N1 security, frequency within plus or minus 0.2 hertz of nominal on major disturbances, and complete nightly reports within operational windows. Goal: propose an operational and near-term planning strategy that meets reliability targets, keeps curtailment and incremental rupees per megawatt hour cost. If students in let's say electrical engineering are at least at some point of time in their 4 years, if they are able to address problems of this nature and in a systematic manner using all the elements of thought, I think they have been trained as engineers. Okay. Besides this, when you are talking of critical thinking, there are also quality. Just because I identified one assumption, it doesn't automatically make you a critical thinker. As we said, we only look at one element, we presented several elements of thought, and if you just pick one and a minor part of that if you have done, it doesn't mean that you have really achieved your goal of being a critical thinker. So what people have done is identified some universal intellectual standards. Universal intellectual standards are standards which should be applied to thinking to ensure its quality. That means critical thinking of good quality, if you want to call it. When do you call something is good quality critical thinking? And for that, standards have been defined. To be learned, they must be taught explicitly. These do not come naturally to individuals. So they have to be taught to people. These are the standards that you should meet. The ultimate goal then is for these standards to become infused in the thinking of students. They have to be infused, internalized to the students, forming part of their inner voice, guiding them to reason better. As I said, it is a tall order, but if faculty are convinced and if they know, if they train themselves as critical thinkers, then they can infuse that slowly through the courses they teach and make their students critical thinkers. It's not an easy task, but that is the goal. Everyone, left, right, center, in all policy statements, people talk about the importance of critical thinking. And what are these intellectual standards? Clarity. Clarity is a gateway standard. If a statement is unclear, we cannot determine whether it is accurate or relevant. Statement should be clear. Accuracy. Accuracy is one feature. A statement can be clear but not accurate. Precision. A statement can be both clear and accurate but not precise. Relevance, how is that connected to the question? How does that bear on the issue? Depth, how does your answer address the complexities in the question? How are you taking into account the problems in the question? Are you dealing with the most significant factors? Breadth, do we need to consider another point of view? Is there another way to look at this question? What would this look like from a conservative standpoint? What would this look like from the point of view of? So you can keep extending that. Logic part, does this really make sense? Does that follow from what you said? How does that follow? Before you implied this and now you are saying this. I do not know how both can be true. Okay, you should never get into that mode. Fairness, are we considering all relevant viewpoints in good faith? Are we distorting some information to maintain our biased perspective? Are we more concerned about vested interests than common good? So these are the intellectual standards that can be used to determine the quality of your critical thinking. And as we said, one of the issues of critical thinking, as per Brookfield, it is assumption hunting. He uses the word as assumption hunting, that is identifying the assumptions. Assumption hunting is central technique deliberately searching for hidden, taken for granted or emotionally defended beliefs that underlie statements, decisions, policies or classroom practice. Three kinds of assumptions people need to be alert to. These are paradigmatic, prescriptive and causal. The paradigmatic assumptions are the hardest of all assumptions to uncover. They are generally right from your childhood, they are imbibed. It's a part of the culture, part of the household that you grew up with, and you think that is all, it is true. What is there to ask for it? But they are all assumptions, and we usually do not even recognize them as assumptions, even after they have been pointed out to us. Okay, that happens mainly with regard to our religious beliefs and the kind of practices that follow from that, and when you relate that to a particular problem that you are trying to solve, obviously those are your assumptions under which you are operating. They somehow get reflected in the kind of solution you are looking for. Okay, some paradigmatic assumptions regarding education, if you look at, adults are self-directed learners. People have made this statement, people have written books on that, but it is an assumption. It is not a matter of fact. Critical thinking is an intellectual function only characteristic of adult life. That is, younger people cannot think critically. That is an assumption. Good adult educational processes are inherently democratic, which certainly are not. That we personally have experienced strongly. Education always has a political dimension. Okay, these are some paradigmatic assumptions, and we operate within that. We don't question that. Then you have prescriptive assumptions. Prescriptive assumptions are assumptions about what we think ought to be happening in a particular situation. They are grounded in and extension of our paradigmatic assumptions. If you look at any education policy that has been written, been produced, or on various platforms people do, one of the things is they prescribe, this is what is ought to be done, without questioning whether it is feasible or not. You prescribe, you should be a critical thinker, you should be multidisciplinary, education should be holistic, and he must be trained in AI, without that he is not going to be a human being kind of thing. And when you keep on piling up, you do not even look whether that there can be a feasible solution within that. So, and we suffer in India, especially with regard to education, too many prescriptive assumptions we make. So, some examples: what good learning and educational process should look like, what obligations students and teacher owe to each other. Then come causal assumptions. Causal assumptions are assumptions about how different parts of the world work and about the conditions under which these can be changed. Okay, these are, and about 80% of assumptions covered in any conversation, class or workshop will be causal ones, fortunately, which are more easy to settle rather than paradigmatic assumptions. Of all assumptions we hold, causal ones are the easiest to uncover. These are stated in two ways: assumptions governing the future behavior, like if I do A, then B will happen. That is an assumption. Actually, in system theory, we consider that is not adequate at all. There is no guarantee if I do A, B will happen. But most of the decision making by the policy makers as well as bureaucrats, they follow this: if I do A, then B. Maybe sometimes they will say if B happens, then C also will happen. Assumptions stated retroactively. It is a struggle to understand some concepts. We make that kind of thing, whatever that happened in our earlier life, based on that we make some assumptions. So that is assumptions stated retroactively. And finally, assumptions are rarely right or wrong. There is always a context to that. Assumptions are best thought as more or less contextually appropriate. There are any number of examples that you can give. That is, when something is done in a particular context, it is right. When the context changes, it can be totally wrong also. I think it's a good idea to work out your own examples where the same solution works out to be wrong in one context, right in another context. For example, simple thing that happens in professional life: giving praise for work well done motivates the person receiving praise to work hard in the future. Is that right? Giving praise, is it right or wrong? Yes, it can be right in a context. It can be completely wrong in another context. So please be aware of it, and I am sure you can find out when it can be wrong. So coming to what you call understanding critical thinking, first of all, in my opinion or in my experience, people are not very clear what critical thinking is. But on every platform, as I said, everybody states critical thinking is most important without batting an eyelid. And once you get down to specifics, what constitutes critical thinking, it's a very tall order for anyone. For all of us, it's a tall order to do that. And in the next unit, we will try to understand how to instruct for critical thinking. Till now, we have said what it is and what are the features of that, and then we'll attempt to how can we instruct for critical thinking. And thank you for your attention.